He inherited a forgotten warehouse everyone called worthless. But hidden beneath the rust and decay was a secret worth $250 million that would change everything. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The alarm screamed at 4:30 in the morning, slicing through the darkness of Marcus Reed's bedroom like a blade. He didn't hit snooze, couldn't afford to. His calloused hand slapped the cheap plastic clock silent, and he sat up in bed, joints popping, back aching from the warehouse shift he'd worked just 6 hours ago. 38 years old, and he felt 60. The house was cold. Heat cost money they didn't have, so Marcus kept the thermostat at 58 degrees, and everyone wore layers. He pulled on his work boots in the dark, the leather cracked and splitting at the seams. He'd glued them twice already this month. In the kitchen, he made coffee in a pot older than his kids, the kind that sputtered and hissed like it was angry about being awake too. The fluorescent light above the stove flickered, casting shadows that made the peeling wallpaper look even worse. This place wasn't a home, it was a shelter, barely. Marcus poured coffee into a thermos with a dented side and a lid that didn't quite seal right. He'd burn his hand later when it leaked. Always did. But new thermoses cost $15, and $15 was groceries, was gas, was the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark. He glanced at the pile of mail on the counter, the envelopes he hadn't opened yet because he knew what they said. Past due, final notice, collections. His daughter's school had called twice about unpaid fees. His son needed new shoes, the soles of his current pair held together with duct tape and prayers. Marcus rubbed his face, felt the stubble he didn't have time to shave, and swallowed the guilt that rose in his throat like bile. In the next room, he could hear his daughter Maya stirring. 12 years old, going on 30, forced to grow up faster than any kid should. She'd started making breakfast for her little brother because Marcus left for work before they woke up most days. Came home after they'd gone to bed most nights. He was a ghost in his own house, and he hated it, hated himself for it. But what choice did he have? Work 2 jobs or lose the roof over their heads? Those were the options. He grabbed his keys, checked his wallet. $23 until Friday, 4 days away. He had a quarter tank of gas and pray it would last. The Uber app was already open on his phone. After his 10-hour shift at the warehouse, he'd drive strangers around town until midnight, smile when they didn't tip, and pretend he wasn't dying inside. The door creaked when he opened it. Everything in this rental house creaked, groaned, threatened to fall apart, kind of like him. Marcus stepped into the pre-dawn darkness, breath misting in the frigid air. His car, a 2006 Honda Civic with a mismatched door and a check engine light that had been on for 8 months, sat in the driveway like a tired old dog. He patted the hood. "One more day," he whispered. "Just give me one more day." It started on the 3rd try. He'd stopped at the warehouse by 6 in the morning, just as the sun started thinking about rising. The building was massive, concrete and steel, the kind of place that chewed up men and spit them out broken. Marcus clocked in, pulled on his safety vest, and started loading pallets. His supervisor, a man named Derek who enjoyed his power a little too much, walked past without acknowledgement. Marcus had asked for a raise 3 months ago. Been denied. Asked again. Denied. He made $13 an hour, had worked here for 4 years. Inflation kept climbing. His paycheck stayed the same. By noon, his back was screaming. He'd lifted over 200 boxes, each one feeling heavier than the last. During his 15-minute lunch break, he sat in his car and ate a peanut butter sandwich he'd made at home. No jelly. They'd run out last week. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Dad, they're saying I can't go on the field trip unless we pay. It's $50. Everyone else is going." Marcus stared at the message until his vision blurred. $50. Might as well be 5,000. he texted back. "I'll figure it out, sweetheart, I promise." Another promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The afternoon dragged, his shoulders burned, his hands, wrapped in cheap work gloves that were more whole than fabric, ached with every grip. At 3 o'clock, Derek called him into the office. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Reed," Derek said, not looking up from his computer. "We're cutting hours. You're down to 32 a week starting next Monday." The world tilted. "What?" "Derek, I can't. I need full time. I've got kids." Derek finally looked at him, expression flat. "Not my problem. Company's tightening belts. Be grateful you're not laid off." Marcus wanted to argue, to fight, to flip the desk. Instead, he nodded, swallowed his rage, walked out. Because that's what you do when you're desperate. You take it, you bend, you break quietly so no one has to hear. He clocked out at 4, drove straight to the other side of town and turned on the Uber app. Picked up his first passenger at 4:27, a college kid going to a party. Talked the whole ride about his spring break plans, about how his parents were buying him a new car. Marcus smiled, nodded, said, "That's great, man." Wanted to scream. The kid didn't tip. By 8 o'clock, Marcus had made $43 after Uber's cut. He'd driven 11 rides. His gas light came on. He stopped at a station, put in $10 worth, watched the numbers climb slower than his hopes sinking. He had 3 more hours of driving ahead of him. Had to make rent. Had to feed his kids. Had to keep moving because stopping meant drowning. At 11:30, he got a ping. Last ride of the night. Picked up a woman outside a bar. She was drunk, crying about her ex-boyfriend. Marcus handed her tissues from the glove box, listened to her sob story, drove her safely home. She gave him a $5 tip and said, "You're a good person." He wanted to tell her good people didn't let their kids go hungry, didn't fall behind on every bill, didn't fail at everything that mattered. Instead, he said, "Thank you. Get some rest." He pulled into his driveway at 12:45 in the morning. The house was dark, except for the porch light Maya always left on for him. His little girl, taking care of him. The role reversal made his chest ache. Inside, he found her asleep on the couch, homework spread around her. She'd waited up. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. In the next room, his son Carter, 8 years old with a gap-toothed smile in Marcus's eyes, snored softly. Marcus stood in the doorway watching him. This kid deserved better. They both did. Deserved a father who was present, who wasn't always exhausted, always stressed, always barely hanging on. Deserved stability, opportunity, a childhood that wasn't defined by lack. Marcus leaned against the doorframe and let the tears come, silent and hot. He cried in the dark where no one could see, where he didn't have to be strong. And when he was done, he wiped his face, straightened his shoulders, and went to the kitchen to make tomorrow's peanut butter sandwiches. The call came on a Thursday. Marcus was in the middle of his warehouse shift, stacking boxes of industrial parts, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. You weren't supposed to have phones on the floor, and Derek was already looking for reasons to write him up. But it buzzed again, and again. During his break, he checked. 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. A voicemail. He pressed play, held the phone to his ear. "Mr. Reed, this is Harold Patterson from Patterson and Associates Law Firm. I'm calling regarding your uncle, Gerald Morrison. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Please return my call at your earliest convenience." Marcus stared at the phone. Uncle Gerald. He hadn't thought about that man in 15 years, maybe longer. His mother's brother, the weird one nobody talked about, lived alone in some warehouse on the edge of town. Marcus had met him maybe 3 times as a kid, remembered a tall, quiet man who smelled like motor oil and spoke in short sentences. The family called him eccentric, crazy, a hoarder, someone to be embarrassed about. Marcus called the number back. Harold Patterson answered on the second ring, voice smooth and professional. "Mr. Reed, thank you for returning my call. I'm sorry to inform you that your uncle Gerald Morrison passed away 6 days ago. Heart attack. He was 72. Marcus felt nothing, not sadness, not shock, just a vague sense of disconnection. "Okay," he said. "I'm sorry to hear that." There was a pause, papers rustling. "Mr. Reed, your uncle named you as the sole beneficiary of his estate. I'll need you to come by my office to discuss the details." Beneficiary. Marcus almost laughed. Gerald didn't have anything, lived in a warehouse for God's sake, probably left him a pile of junk and debt. But he said, "Yeah, okay, when?" They scheduled for Saturday morning. Marcus hung up and went back to work, barely giving it another thought. He had bigger problems than a dead uncle he barely knew. Saturday morning came cold and grey, the kind of day that matched Marcus's mood. He'd worked until midnight the night before, woke up at 6 to drive Maya to a friend's house and Carter to his grandmother's. Now he sat in the parking lot of Patterson & Associates, a small office sandwiched between a tax place and a discount shoe store, wondering why he'd bothered coming. Harold Patterson was exactly what Marcus expected. Mid-50s, suit that cost more than Marcus made in a month, handshake firm and practiced. His office smelled like leather and money. Marcus sat in a chair across from the big desk, suddenly aware of his Walmart jeans and worn jacket. "Mr. Reed," Harold began, opening a folder. "Your uncle's estate is relatively simple. He had no other living relatives, no spouse, no children. You're it." Marcus nodded. "Okay." Harold slid a paper across the desk. "He's left you his property. 30 acres on the east side of town, including the main warehouse structure and several outbuildings. There are some complications I need to make you aware of." Marcus picked up the paper, scanned it, saw the address. He knew that place. Everyone in town knew it. The old Morrison property, the eyesore, surrounded by chain-link fence and no trespassing signs, been abandoned for decades or so, people thought. "Complications?" Marcus asked. Harold cleared his throat. "The property has significant back taxes owed, approximately $22,000. If not paid within 60 days, the county will seize the property and auction it to cover the debt. Additionally, there are environmental concerns. The land was used for industrial purposes in the 1940s and 50s. There's been talk of contamination, though nothing's been officially confirmed. Frankly, Mr. Reed, this property is more of a liability than an asset." Marcus set the paper down. "So I'm inheriting debt and toxic land?" Harold nodded sympathetically. "I'm afraid so. You have the option to refuse the inheritance. Many people in your position would." Marcus should have refused right then, should have walked out, gone home, forgotten this ever happened. But something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the memory of his uncle, strange as he was, carefully writing Marcus's name in his will. Maybe it was desperation, the wild hope that somewhere in this mess was something, anything, that could help him climb out of the hole he was drowning in. "I want to see it," Marcus said. Harold raised an eyebrow. "The property?" Marcus nodded. "Before I decide, I want to see what I'm refusing." Harold hesitated, then pulled a set of keys from the folder. Old brass keys on a ring, heavy and tarnished. "The property is legally yours now, so you have every right. But Mr. Reed, I'd advise caution. The buildings are structurally unsound. There's no power, no water. And frankly, your uncle was known to be paranoid in his later years. There's no telling what you might find in there." Marcus took the keys. They were cold in his palm. "I'll be careful." Harold stood, extending his hand. "If you decide to accept the inheritance, come back and sign the papers. If not, just let me know by the end of next week." Marcus shook his hand and left, the keys heavy in his pocket. He drove straight there, couldn't help himself. The property sat on Milner Road, a stretch of forgotten asphalt that dead-ended at the old industrial district. Chain-link fence, 10 feet tall and topped with barbed wire, surrounded the entire lot. Marcus parked outside the gate, stared through the mesh at the sprawling complex beyond. The main warehouse was massive, easily 100 feet long and 60 feet wide, constructed of corrugated metal and concrete blocks. The roof sagged in places. Rust ate through the siding like cancer. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth. Around it, smaller outbuildings stood in various states of decay. Weeds grew waist-high everywhere. Trash caught in the fence line, fluttering in the wind. Graffiti tagged the visible walls, crude and faded. This was what his uncle had spent his life protecting. Marcus almost turned around right then. But the gate was unlocked, just needed the chain removed, so he did. Pushed it open with a screech of metal on metal that made him wince. He walked up the cracked concrete path, boots crunching on broken glass and pebbles. The front door of the warehouse was solid steel, pocked with rust but intact. The lock was military grade, he could tell that much, unusual for an abandoned building. He tried the first key, didn't fit, tried the second. It slid in smooth, turned with a heavy click. The door opened inward. The smell hit him first, not decay like he expected, but something else. Oil, metal. The scent of things kept dry and preserved. Marcus stepped inside, let his eyes adjust to the dimness. Afternoon light filtered through dirty windows high on the walls, casting everything in grey. The space was enormous. Open floor plan, support beams every 20 feet, concrete floor stained and cracked but solid. And everywhere shapes. Large shapes covered in heavy canvas tarps, arranged in rows. Marcus walked deeper into the warehouse, heart pounding for reasons he couldn't name. The tarps were industrial grade, tied down with ropes, some dusty but none rotted. He approached the nearest one. It was huge, at least 40 feet long. He grabbed the edge of the tarp and pulled. It resisted, heavy and stiff, but he yanked harder. The fabric fell away. Marcus stumbled backward. Beneath the tarp sat an airplane. Not a small plane, a fighter plane. The kind he'd seen in World War II documentaries. The metal skin gleamed dull silver in the low light, every rivet visible, every panel intact. The nose cone was painted with art, a pin-up girl and the words "Heaven's Fury" in faded script. Marcus couldn't breathe. He moved to the next tarp, ripped it off. Another plane, this one dark green, the cockpit glass unbroken, the propeller blades crossed in rest. The next tarp revealed a bomber, massive and imposing, turrets still mounted, guns long removed but the structure perfect. He tore through the warehouse like a madman, pulling tarp after tarp. P-51 Mustangs, B-17 Flying Fortresses, planes he didn't recognize, prototypes maybe, experimental models. Each one preserved, maintained, sitting silent in the darkness like sleeping giants. By the time he'd uncovered 12 of them, his hands were shaking. His mind raced, unable to process what he was seeing. These weren't junkers, these weren't scrap metal. These were museum-quality aircraft, sitting in his dead uncle's warehouse like they'd been parked there yesterday. Marcus found a workbench along the far wall, covered in notebooks and binders. He grabbed one, flipped it open. Inside, meticulous handwriting documented everything. Aircraft type, serial number, acquisition date, restoration notes. His uncle's hand, careful and precise. Each entry was dated, some going back 40 years. 1984, acquired P-51 Mustang, serial number 4413728. Fuselage intact, engine seized, began restoration. 1986, restoration complete. Engine runs, flight ready, preserved in Warehouse Bay 3. Entry after entry, year after year. Gerald had spent 4 decades collecting these planes, restoring them, hiding them. Marcus opened another binder. This one held provenance documents, bills of sale, authentication certificates, letters from the Smithsonian asking to purchase specific aircraft, offers from private collectors, some in the millions of dollars. Every single one declined. notes in the margins in Gerald's hand. They belong together, won't separate them, won't let them be sold off piece by piece. Marcus sank onto a stool, legs weak. His uncle wasn't crazy, he was a preservationist, a guardian. He'd dedicated his entire life to saving these pieces of history, keeping them safe, intact, hidden from a world that would have scattered them to the winds for profit. And now it was Marcus's. All of it. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers, searched online. World War II aircraft values. The results made his vision swim. A restored P-51 Mustang, $2 to $4 million. A B-17 bomber, up to $9 million. Experimental prototypes, priceless. He did quick math in his head, counting the planes he could see, estimating the ones still covered deeper in the warehouse. Conservative estimate, if these were authenticated, if they were in the condition the notebook suggested, this collection could be worth $100 million. Maybe more. Maybe $200 million. Maybe more than that. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand, clattered on the concrete. He sat in the silence of the warehouse, surrounded by ghosts of war and glory, and tried to understand how his life had just changed. How he'd gone from eviction notices and empty refrigerators to this. To a fortune hidden beneath rust and tarps. To a legacy his strange, silent uncle had left specifically for him. But why? Why him? Marcus barely knew Gerald. They'd spoken maybe a handful of times at family gatherings decades ago. He picked up another notebook, this one older, the cover worn soft, open to the first page. There, in his uncle's careful script, was an entry dated 2 months ago. I'm dying. Heart's giving out. Doctors say maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. Been thinking about who should get the collection. Thought about donating to museums, but they'll split everything up. Sell what they don't want. Forget the mission. Thought about the government, but they lost their chance to care about these birds decades ago. Kept coming back to one name. Marcus, my nephew. Haven't seen him since he was a boy, but I remember him. Curious kid. Asked good questions. Didn't treat me like I was crazy. Heard through the family he's struggling. Single father, 2 kids, working himself to death. Sounds like me 40 years ago. Maybe he'll understand why I did this. Maybe he'll protect them like I did. Maybe this is his second chance. God knows he's earned it. Marcus's eyes blurred. Tears dropped onto the page, smudging the ink. His uncle had been watching from a distance, had known, had cared enough to leave him everything. Not because of blood or obligation, but because Gerald saw something in him worth believing in. Marcus closed the notebook, pressed it to his chest, and let himself cry. Really cry. Not the silent tears of exhaustion he shed in dark hallways, but deep, wrenching sobs that echoed through the warehouse. He cried for the years of struggle, for the nights he'd gone hungry so his kids could eat, for every humiliation and failure and moment he'd felt worthless. And he cried for his uncle, this strange, brilliant man who'd died alone, who'd spent his life protecting beauty when the world called him crazy, who'd given Marcus a gift so profound it felt like resurrection. When the tears stopped, Marcus stood, wiped his face, looked around at the planes with new eyes. This wasn't just money. This was responsibility, purpose, a mission handed down from a man who'd carried it alone for 40 years. And now it was Marcus's turn. He pulled out his phone, took pictures of everything. The planes, the notebooks, the documents, uploaded them to cloud storage, sent copies to his own email. If something happened, if this was all somehow taken away, he'd have proof. Evidence that this was real, that his life had just split into before and after. He worked until dark, documenting, photographing, reading through years of his uncle's meticulous records. Found letters Gerald had written but never sent, explaining his mission, his vision. These planes fought for freedom. Men died in them, bled in them, trusted them with their lives. They deserve better than to rot in some rich man's garage or be chopped up for parts. They deserve to be remembered, honored, kept together so people can see what sacrifice looks like, what heroism looks like. I've kept them safe. When I'm gone, someone else will have to carry that torch. I hope they understand the weight of it. I hope they're stronger than I was." Marcus understood, felt the weight settle onto his shoulders, heavy and right. He locked the warehouse when he left, pocketed the keys, drove home in a daze, mind spinning with plans and fears and impossible hope. The house was quiet when he got back. Maya and Carter were asleep. His mother had stayed with them. She was waiting in the kitchen, coffee cup in hand. "You were gone a long time," she said. "What did Gerald leave you?" Marcus sat down across from her, didn't know where to start. "Mom," he said slowly, "did you know Uncle Gerald collected airplanes?" She frowned. "What?" "No, he lived in that warehouse, worked on cars or something. Why?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her the pictures, watched her face change as she scrolled through image after image of pristine vintage aircraft. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Marcus, are these real?" He nodded. "They're real, and they're mine, all of them." His mother stared at him, coffee forgotten. "How much are they worth?" Marcus swallowed. "A lot, Mum. Maybe 100 million, maybe more." The cup slipped from her fingers, shattered on the floor. Neither of them moved to clean it up. They just sat there in the kitchen, surrounded by broken porcelain and spilled coffee, trying to comprehend the impossible. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't stop racing. The collection was real. The value was real. But so were the complications. 22,000 in back taxes due in 60 days. Environmental concerns. Structural issues with the buildings. And he'd have to tell people. Authenticate the planes. Deal with the government, with collectors, with everyone who'd suddenly want a piece of what his uncle had protected for decades. And then there was the bigger question. What did he do with it? Sell everything and walk away rich? That would solve every problem he had. Pay off debt, buy a house, put his kids through college, never worry about money again. But the thought of it made his stomach turn. His uncle had trusted him, had specifically chosen him to carry on the mission, to keep the collection together, to honor the history, to protect what mattered. Could Marcus do that? Did he have the strength? He thought about Gerald, alone in that warehouse for 40 years, turning down millions, refusing to compromise, staying true to his purpose. Thought about the letter. Maybe this is his second chance. Maybe it was. Maybe Marcus had been drowning for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to have purpose beyond survival. Maybe this was his chance to build something that mattered, to teach his kids that some things are more important than money, to prove that even a struggling, exhausted, broken-down single dad could protect something beautiful. He reached over, grabbed his phone, opened the photos, stared at the planes in the darkness, their metal skin gleaming even in low resolution. Heaven's Fury, Liberty Bell, Ghost Rider, each name a story, each plane a piece of history, each one trusting him now. "Okay, Uncle Gerald," Marcus whispered into the dark. "I'll do it. I don't know how, but I'll protect them, I promise." And somewhere in that moment, between fear and faith, Marcus Reed made a choice that would change everything. Not to take the easy way out, not to sell and run, but to fight, to stand, to become the guardian his uncle believed he could be. The warehouse was his now. The planes were his. The mission was his. And come hell or high water, he was going to see it through. Marcus didn't tell anyone at first. Not his mother, not his friends, nobody. He kept showing up to his warehouse job, kept driving Uber at night, kept pretending his life was exactly the same as it had been a week ago. But inside, everything had changed. He carried the secret like a stone in his chest, heavy and sharp. Every time Derek yelled at him about a misplaced pallet, every time a drunk passenger complained about the route, every time he counted out exact change for gas, Marcus thought about those planes sitting in the darkness, waiting. Worth more than everyone in this town would make in their entire lives combined. and they were his. He went back to the warehouse every chance he got. Before his morning shift, during lunch breaks, late at night, after his last Uber ride. He'd unlock that heavy steel door, step into the silence, and just walk among them. The Mustangs with their sleek bodies and fierce painted noses. The bombers, massive and imposing, built to carry death across oceans. Each time he pulled back another tarp, his breath caught. A Corsair with its distinctive bent wings. A Thunderbolt, squat and powerful. A Liberator with nose art of a woman blowing a kiss. 27 aircraft total. He counted them 3 times to be sure. Some were common models, relatively speaking. Others were rare. And 2, according to his uncle's notes, were experimental prototypes that weren't supposed to exist anymore, listed as destroyed in 1946 after the war ended. But here they sat, hidden away, preserved perfectly. Marcus spent hours reading through Gerald's journals. His uncle had been meticulous, obsessive even. Every restoration was documented with photographs, receipts, technical notes. Gerald had taught himself aircraft mechanics from manuals, had sourced parts from junkyards and estate sales and military surplus auctions, had worked alone, trusted no one, spent every dollar he earned on the collection. Never married, never had kids, never took a vacation. Just the planes. Always the planes. In one entry from 1992, Gerald wrote about an offer from a private collector. $7 million for just 3 of the Mustangs. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He'd turned it down. They want to separate them, Gerald wrote. Put them in different hangars across the country. These birds flew together, fought together. They stay together. That's the mission. That's the promise I made. Marcus understood that promise now, felt it in his bones. But understanding didn't make the practical problems disappear. He had 60 days to pay $22,000 in back taxes or lose everything. His bank account had $437 in it. He'd done the math 100 times. Even if he sold his car, maxed out what little credit he had left, begged everyone he knew, he couldn't come close. And selling even one plane would take months. Authentication, appraisals, finding the right buyer. The county wouldn't wait. They'd seize the property, auction it off to the highest bidder, and everything Gerald had built would be scattered, like Gerald feared. Marcus couldn't let that happen. Wouldn't let that happen. But he had no idea how to stop it. On Tuesday morning, he decided he needed help. Couldn't do this alone. He called the one person he thought might understand. David Chen, an old friend from high school who'd gone into aviation mechanics, worked at a small airfield outside of town, restoring vintage planes for rich hobbyists. Marcus hadn't talked to him in maybe 5 years, but he still had his number. David answered on the 3rd ring. Marcus Reed. Holy shit, man. You still alive? Marcus laughed despite himself. Barely. Hey, I need to talk to you about something. Something big. Can you meet me? They met at a diner that afternoon. David showed up in coveralls, grease under his nails, looking exactly like Marcus remembered. They ordered coffee, made small talk for exactly 90 seconds before David cut through it. What's going on? You sounded weird on the phone. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the photo gallery, slid it across the table. Tell me what you see. David picked it up, started scrolling. His expression changed immediately. Went from casual to confused to absolutely stunned in the space of 30 seconds. Where the hell did you get these pictures? David whispered. Marcus leaned forward. My uncle died, left me his warehouse. These were inside. David's hands were shaking. He zoomed in on one of the photos, a close-up of a Mustang serial number. Marcus, do you understand what you're looking at? This is a P-51D model, probably 1944 production based on the markings. If this is real, if it's actually flight-worthy like it looks, you're talking $3 to $4 million. Just for this one plane. Marcus nodded. There are 27 of them. David nearly dropped the phone. 27? Are you fucking serious? Marcus showed him more photos. The bombers, the prototypes, the documentation. David went pale. I need to see them, in person. When can we go? They went that evening after David's shift ended. Marcus drove them to Milner Road in his dying Civic, David practically vibrating with excitement in the passenger seat. When they pulled up to the fence, David stared through the chain link at the warehouse complex. Your uncle lived here? Marcus nodded. For 40 years. Alone. They walked to the warehouse. Marcus unlocked it, stepped inside, watched David's face in the fading light filtering through the high windows as the reality of it hit him. The planes sat in their rows, tarps pulled back, metal gleaming. David walked forward like he was in a church, approached the nearest Mustang with reverence, ran his hand along the fuselage. Oh my God, he breathed. The paint, the rivets. Marcus, this is showroom condition. Better than showroom. This is perfection. He moved from plane to plane, examining details, checking serial numbers against photos on his phone, muttering to himself. Marcus watched, waiting. Finally, David turned around. His eyes were wide, almost frightened. Marcus, do you have any idea what you're sitting on here? Any idea at all? Marcus crossed his arms. Tell me. David gestured around. This isn't just a collection. This is history. These are museum-quality aircraft, some of them one of a kind. That Corsair over there. There are maybe 5 in the world in this condition. That B-17, fully restored original parts, $9 million minimum. And those 2 in the back, the ones with the weird tail configurations, I don't even recognize those models. Could be experimental, could be priceless. He walked closer to Marcus. Conservative estimate. If everything here is authentic and functional, you're looking at 150 million, maybe 200 million, maybe more. The number hung in the air between them. Marcus felt dizzy. That's what I thought. But David, there's a problem. He explained about the taxes, the 60-day deadline, the environmental concerns, the fact that he had no money, no way to pay, no legal team, nothing. David listened, his expression darkening. So you're telling me you inherited $200 million worth of aircraft and you might lose it all because of $22,000 in back taxes? Marcus laughed bitterly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. David paced, thinking. Okay, we can figure this out. First thing, you need authentication, official appraisals, documentation proving these are what we think they are. That gives you leverage with the county, with lenders, with anyone. Second, you need legal help, someone who specializes in estate law, aviation law, all of it. And third, you need security. Marcus, once word gets out about this, people are going to come after you. Collectors, scammers, the government, everyone. Marcus felt the weight of it pressing down. I can't afford any of that. David stopped pacing, looked at him hard. Then we find people who'll work on contingency, lawyers who'll take a percentage instead of upfront payment, appraisers who'll authenticate in exchange for first option to broker a sale if it comes to that. This is too big to keep secret, Marcus. You're going to have to let people in, people who can help. Marcus knew he was right, but the thought of opening this up, of losing control, terrified him. My uncle kept this secret for 4 decades. David nodded. And he died alone with no one to pass it to but a nephew he barely knew. With respect to Gerald, you can't do this his way. Times are different. You've got kids depending on you. You need allies. They stood in the warehouse as darkness fell outside, surrounded by silent metal giants. Marcus made a decision. Okay, help me. I don't know where to start, but help me protect this. David extended his hand. They shook. I've got a buddy who's an aviation appraiser. Owes me a favor. I'll call him tonight. And I know a lawyer who handles weird estate cases. She's tough as nails. We'll set up meetings, get the ball rolling. But Marcus, we need to move fast. 60 days isn't much time. They locked up the warehouse, drove back into town. Marcus dropped David off, thanked him, drove home feeling lighter than he had in days. He had help now, had someone who understood. Maybe this was actually possible. But the universe had other plans. The next morning, Marcus was loading boxes at the warehouse when Derek called him into the office again. "Reed, you've got a visitor." Marcus frowned. "A visitor? Who?" Derek shrugged. "Some guy in a suit waiting in the break room." Marcus's stomach dropped. He walked to the break room, found a man sitting at the plastic table, looking completely out of place among the vending machines and scattered lunchboxes. The man was mid-40s, expensive suit, styled hair, shoes that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. He stood when Marcus entered, extended a hand, smile wide and empty. "Marcus Reed, Richard Beaumont, I wonder if I could have a moment of your time." Marcus didn't shake his hand. "I'm working. What's this about?" Richard's smile didn't waver. "It's about the property you recently inherited, the Morrison Estate on Milner Road. I represent a development group interested in acquiring it." Marcus's blood went cold. How did this guy already know? He'd told no one except David. "Not interested," Marcus said flatly. Richard chuckled. "You haven't even heard my offer. $100,000 cash, closing within a week. We'll handle all the back taxes, all the environmental cleanup, all the paperwork. You walk away clean with money in your pocket." 100,000. A week ago, that would have been a fortune. Life-changing money. But now, knowing what sat in that warehouse, it was an insult. A joke. "Like I said, not interested." Richard's smile finally faded. "Mr. Reed, let me be frank. That property is a liability. Contaminated land, structural issues, crushing debt. You're a working man, you can't afford to take that on. We're offering you a clean exit." Marcus stepped closer. "How did you know about the inheritance? It's barely been public record for a week." Richard shrugged. "We keep track of properties in the industrial district. Make it our business to know what's available." Marcus didn't believe him for a second. Someone had tipped him off. Someone knew about the planes, or suspected, and sent this vulture circling. "My answer is no. Now get out before I have you escorted out." Richard's expression hardened. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. "You're making a mistake. That property is worthless. You're going to lose it anyway when the taxes come due. Might as well take the money while it's on the table." Marcus walked to the door, held it open. "Get out." Richard stood slowly, straightened his jacket. "Think about it, Mr. Reed. My card." He set a business card on the table. "Offer expires in 48 hours. After that, well, things get complicated." He walked past Marcus, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. When he was gone, Marcus picked up the card. "Richard Beaumont, Beaumont Development Group." On the back, a handwritten note. 100,000 final offer. Don't be stupid." Marcus crumpled it, threw it in the trash. His hands were shaking. That night, he told David what happened. They met at the warehouse, doors locked, lights low. David looked worried. "He came to your work. That's aggressive. How the hell did he find out so fast?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The lawyer, Patterson, he knew. Maybe his secretary talks. Maybe someone at the county office. Doesn't matter. Word's out. David paced between the planes. "This is bad, Marcus. If Beaumont knows, others will know soon. You're going to have vultures circling. You need protection. Need to lock this down legally, fast. What happens next will turn this inheritance upside down, reveal threats nobody expected, and test whether one struggling father has the strength to protect a fortune everyone wants to take." Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus barely slept that night, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind racing through scenarios. What if Richard came back with more pressure? What if he tried to force the sale somehow? What if there were others, worse than him, already planning moves Marcus couldn't see? By dawn, he'd made a decision. He needed the planes authenticated immediately, needed proof of what they were worth, needed leverage. David set up an emergency meeting with his appraiser friend, a man named Thomas who specialized in military aircraft. They met at the warehouse 2 days later. Thomas was in his 60s, grey beard, careful eyes. He walked through the collection in silence for over an hour, taking photos, checking serial numbers, examining every detail. Marcus and David waited, anxious. Finally, Thomas approached them. "Mr. Reed, I need to ask you something important. Where did your uncle acquire these aircraft?" Marcus showed him the journals, the bills of sale, the provenance documents. Thomas read through them carefully. "This is extraordinary. Your uncle was sourcing these from estate auctions, military surplus sales, private collectors, all legal, all documented. Some of these purchases go back to the 1970s when you could still find warbirds in barns and abandoned hangars." He closed the journal. "I can authenticate 23 of these aircraft without question. The other 4, including those 2 experimental models, I'll need to bring in specialists. But based on what I'm seeing, your collection is legitimate, and it's worth substantially more than you probably realize." Marcus swallowed. "How much?" Thomas pulled out a notepad, did some calculations. "Conservative estimate, assuming everything is as documented, $230 million. Possibly as high as $280 million if those experimental birds are what I think they are. This is one of the most significant private collections of World War II aircraft in the world." The number hit Marcus like a physical force. 230 million. He had to sit down. Thomas continued. "But Mr. Reed, you need to understand the position you're in. This collection will attract attention from museums, collectors, governments, and less savory characters. People will try to buy it, steal it, discredit it. You need legal protection immediately, and you need to decide what you want to do with it." Marcus looked up. "What do you mean?" Thomas gestured around. "Are you going to sell, piece by piece or as a whole? Donate to a museum? Keep it private? Open it to the public? Each option has different legal and financial implications. But you can't just leave it sitting here once word gets out. It's too valuable, too vulnerable." Marcus thought about his uncle's journals, the promise to keep the collection together. "I want to keep them together. Open some kind of museum, maybe. Let people see them. Honor what my uncle built." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That's a good instinct, but it'll take time, money, and expertise you don't have. In the meantime, you need security, cameras, alarms, insurance, and you need that tax bill resolved." Over the next week, things accelerated. David helped Marcus install security cameras around the warehouse. Battery-powered, motion-activated, uploading to cloud storage. Thomas connected him with a lawyer named Patricia Reynolds, who specialized in aviation law and historic preservation. She agreed to work on contingency, taking a percentage of future revenue instead of upfront fees. Patricia was sharp, direct, no nonsense. Met with Marcus at a coffee shop, reviewed the documents, listened to his situation. "Mr. Reed, you're in a precarious position legally. The property is yours, the collection is yours, but until those taxes are paid, the county can seize everything. We need to file for an extension, claim the property's value warrants more time for proper assessment. I can buy you maybe 90 days. But that's it." 90 days was better than 60. Marcus signed the paperwork authorizing her to represent him. She filed the extension request that afternoon. Got approval 3 days later. Breathing room? Barely. But the pressure kept building. Marcus started noticing cars parked outside the warehouse at odd hours. Different cars, different people, but always watching. Someone tried to break in one night. The cameras caught a figure in dark clothes attempting to cut the fence. They ran when the motion sensor lights kicked on. Marcus called the police. They took a report, said they'd increase patrols. Didn't sound convinced it mattered. Then the letters started. Offers to purchase the property, hand-delivered to Marcus's house. Some legitimate sounding from aviation museums and historical societies. Others vague and threatening. One simply said, Sell now while you can. Accidents happen. Marcus showed them to Patricia. She went pale. This is escalating faster than I expected. These people, whoever they are, they're getting desperate. You need to be careful, Marcus. Watch your back. He tried to keep his normal routine, kept working at the warehouse, kept driving Uber, but paranoia crept in. Every car behind him could be a tail. Every stranger at the grocery store could be watching. He moved Maya and Carter to his mother's house temporarily, told them it was just while he dealt with Uncle Gerald's estate. Didn't tell them about the threats. Didn't want to scare them. But they knew something was wrong. Maya asked him one night on the phone, "Dad, are you okay? You sound weird." He forced brightness into his voice. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy. I'll come get you guys soon, I promise." Hung up, feeling like the worst father in the world, protecting them by pushing them away. Story of his life. Richard Beaumont showed up again, this time at the warehouse itself. Marcus arrived one evening to find him leaning against a black SUV parked outside the fence. 2 other men sat in the vehicle, watching. "Mr. Reed," Richard called out, "we need to talk." Marcus's hand went to his phone. "I told you I'm not interested. Leave or I'm calling the cops." Richard raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy. I'm just here to give you some friendly advice. You've been asking around about authentication, appraisals. Word gets around. People are curious what you're hiding in there." He nodded toward the warehouse. Marcus said nothing. Richard smiled. "See, the thing is that curiosity can be dangerous. Lots of folks in this town have long memories. Remember when your uncle claimed that land was contaminated, fought off developers for years? Some people lost money because of him, held grudges. Now here you are, his heir, sitting on property those people still want, makes you a target." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Is that a threat?" Richard shrugged. "It's a reality check. You're a working guy, single dad, no resources. You can't fight this battle, but I can make it go away. 150,000 final offer. You take the money, sign over the property, walk away. Everyone's happy." Marcus stepped closer to the fence, looked Richard in the eye. "You know what's in there, don't you? You know it's worth way more than 150,000. Richard's smile grew sharper. "I know it's worth whatever I decide it's worth once I own it, which I will, one way or another. Question is whether you profit or lose everything trying to hold on." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." Richard's expression darkened. "Your kids. They go to Lincoln Elementary, right? Cute school. My nephew goes there too. Small world." Rage exploded in Marcus's chest. He was through the gate before he knew he'd moved, fists clenched, ready to tear Richard apart. The 2 men jumped out of the SUV immediately, stepped between them. Big guys, clearly hired muscle. Richard laughed, backing toward his vehicle. "Easy, hero. I'm just making conversation. But you should think real hard about what you're protecting and whether it's worth putting your family at risk, because this isn't going away. Tick-tock, Marcus. Clock's running." They got in the SUV and drove off, tires kicking up gravel. Marcus stood shaking with adrenaline and fear. He'd been threatened before, been pushed around by life plenty, but threatening his kids crossed a line he didn't know existed until that moment. He called Patricia immediately, told her what happened. "That's criminal intimidation," she said. "We're filing a police report tonight. And Marcus, I'm serious. You need to consider protective measures. Maybe move your kids somewhere safe until this settles." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say he could handle it, but he couldn't. Not against people like Richard with money and connections and willingness to cross any line. That night, he sat his mother down, explained some of what was happening. Not all of it, didn't want to terrify her, but enough. "Mum, I need Maya and Carter to stay with you for a while longer, maybe a few weeks. There are some people trying to pressure me about Uncle Gerald's property. Nothing dangerous," he lied, "but I want the kids out of it." His mother studied his face. "Marcus, what have you gotten into?" He shook his head. I'm trying to do the right thing. Protect something Uncle Gerald spent his life building. But it's complicated. Please, just keep the kids safe. I'll explain everything when it's over." She didn't look convinced, but agreed. Marcus hugged her tight, then went to say goodnight to Maya and Carter. They were in the guest room, Maya reading, Carter playing with toy cars. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "Hey guys, I know this is weird staying at Grandma's, but it's going to be okay, I promise." Carter climbed into his lap. "When are we coming home, Dad?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Soon, buddy. Soon as I can manage it." Maya looked at him with those two wise eyes. "Does this have to do with Uncle Gerald's stuff? The warehouse?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. There are some people who want what he left me. I'm just making sure it stays safe." Maya closed her book. "Is it dangerous?" He wanted to lie, but something in her expression stopped him. She deserved some truth. "It could be. That's why you're here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you guys. Ever." She nodded slowly. "We trust you, Dad." Those 4 words nearly broke him. They trusted him. After years of struggle, of barely being present, of failing to give them what they deserved, they still trusted him. He had to be worthy of that. Had to protect not just the planes, but them. Everything that mattered. The next morning, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't fight this alone. Couldn't protect a $250 million collection with security cameras and hope. He needed more. Needed people who understood what was at stake. He called Thomas, the appraiser. "I need you to contact the museums, the Smithsonian, the National Air Force Museum, whoever you think should know about this collection. Not to sell, but to get their support, their protection, people who'll vouch that this needs to be preserved." Thomas was silent for a moment. "That's smart. If you have institutional backing, it makes it harder for people like Beaumont to move against you. I'll make calls today." Marcus then called David. "I need more help. People who care about these planes. Veterans maybe, aviation enthusiasts. People who'd be willing to stand with me if things get ugly." David understood immediately. "I know some guys, vets who restore planes as therapy, members of the Commemorative Air Force. Let me reach out, see who's willing." Within 48 hours, something unexpected started happening. People showed up. First, it was just 2 guys, both Vietnam vets in their 70s, who David had contacted. They arrived at the warehouse with coffee and determination. "Your friend David said you had some warbirds that need protecting," one of them said. His name was Frank. "We're here to help." Marcus showed them inside, watched their faces transform when they saw the collection. Frank approached a B-17, reached out with shaking hands, touched the fuselage. "Oh my God," he whispered. "I flew in one of these. 68 missions over Germany. I thought I'd never see one this intact again." He turned to Marcus, eyes wet. "Son, whatever you're trying to do here, whatever you need, we're in." More came. Retired mechanics, aviation historians, members of veteran organizations who heard through the grapevine that something special was being protected. By the end of the week, Marcus had a rotating volunteer crew of 15 people helping secure the warehouse, document the planes, stand watch. They brought their own tools, their own expertise, their own fierce love for these pieces of history. One night, as Marcus was locking up, an older woman approached him. Her name was Helen, and she'd shown up that morning. "My husband flew Mustangs in Korea," she said quietly. "Died 30 years ago. Never talked much about the war, but he loved those planes. Said they saved his life more times than he could count. When I heard someone was trying to protect a collection like this, I had to come. He would have wanted me to." Marcus didn't know what to say, just nodded, throat tight. These people weren't here for money or glory. They were here because the planes meant something, represented something. Sacrifice, courage, history. The same things Gerald had dedicated his life to preserving. and now Marcus was part of that legacy, whether he was ready or not. But the threats didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Someone slashed the tires on Marcus's car. Graffiti appeared on the warehouse walls overnight, crude and threatening. Sell or else. His Uber account was hacked, flooded with fake complaints that got him temporarily suspended. Small attacks, designed to wear him down, make him desperate. Patricia filed restraining orders against Richard Beaumont and his company. They were served but ignored. Richard's lawyers filed counter motions, claiming Marcus was slandering their client, interfering with legitimate business. The legal battle was heating up, costing money Marcus didn't have, even with Patricia working on contingency. Court fees, filing fees, expert witnesses. It added up fast. Marcus's savings, the tiny amount he'd had, evaporated. He took out a high-interest personal loan for $5,000 just to cover immediate expenses. Knew he was digging a hole but had no choice. The tax extension bought him time but not much. 90 days sounded long until you were living it, watching the calendar, feeling each day slip away. Then something shifted. The Smithsonian sent a representative, a curator named Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who specialized in military aviation. She flew in from D.C., spent an entire day examining the collection with Thomas. Marcus watched her face as she moved from plane to plane, taking notes, photographing details. When she finished, she approached him with an expression he couldn't read. "Mr. Reed, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've seen collections from around the world. This is extraordinary. These aircraft, especially the experimental models, they belong in a museum. They belong to history." Marcus's heart sank. She wanted them for the Smithsonian, wanted to take them away. But Dr. Warren smiled. "I'm not here to make an offer or pressure you. I'm here to tell you that the Smithsonian supports your effort to preserve this collection intact. We'd like to partner with you, help authenticate, provide conservation expertise, offer legal backing. In exchange, we'd ask for the opportunity to display some of these aircraft on loan in the future, but the collection stays yours, stays together." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to help? Not buy?" Dr. Warren nodded. "Your uncle spent 4 decades protecting these planes from being scattered. We respect that mission. Besides, if you're serious about opening a museum, having Smithsonian partnership gives you credibility, protection, and resources. We've dealt with people like Richard Beaumont before. They tend to back off when major institutions are involved." She extended her hand. "What do you say?" Marcus shook it, feeling something like hope bloom in his chest for the first time in weeks. "Yes, absolutely yes." The partnership was formalized within days. The Smithsonian issued a press release announcing their collaboration with the Morrison Collection, calling it one of the most significant discoveries of World War II aircraft in modern history. Overnight, everything changed. Media descended. Local news, then national news, then international outlets. Reporters camped outside the warehouse. Marcus gave a brief statement, kept it simple. "My uncle dedicated his life to preserving these aircraft. I'm honored to continue that work with support from the Smithsonian and others who understand their value." The coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Social media exploded. Aviation enthusiasts from around the world weighed in. Donations started flowing in from people who wanted to support the preservation effort. Small amounts mostly, $20 here, $50 there, but it added up. 5,000, then 10,000, then 20. And Richard Beaumont went quiet. His lawyers stopped filing motions. The threatening letters stopped. Marcus didn't trust it. Knew Beaumont was just regrouping, but the breathing room was welcome. Patricia explained it simply. "He lost the narrative. You're not some desperate guy trying to hoard junk anymore. You're a custodian of national heritage backed by the Smithsonian. Attacking you now makes him look like the villain." But she warned him, "This isn't over. Men like Beaumont don't give up. They pivot. Watch your back." Marcus took the advice seriously, kept the volunteer security rotation, kept the cameras running, slept with his phone next to the bed, ready to call 911 at any moment. The stress was crushing. He'd lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, wasn't sleeping, could barely eat. His boss at the warehouse job noticed, asked if he was okay. Marcus lied, said he was fine, got written up for decreased productivity, didn't care anymore. The warehouse job, the Uber driving, all of it felt meaningless now compared to what he was protecting. His old life was slipping away, and his new life hadn't quite solidified. He existed in limbo, exhausted and wired, running on nothing but determination and caffeine. One night, very late, Marcus sat alone in the warehouse. The volunteers had gone home. The place was dark except for a single work light he'd set up near Gerald's old desk. He opened another of his uncle's journals, one from the early days, 1977. Gerald had just acquired his third plane, a Corsair. The entry was short. Brought her home today. Took every dollar I had saved. People think I'm crazy. Maybe they're right. But when I look at these planes, I see the men who flew them. The boys who climbed into these cockpits knowing they might not come back. They deserve to be remembered. If no one else will do it, I will, even if it costs me everything. Marcus closed the journal, rested his head in his hands. Gerald had been alone. No wife, no kids, no one to support him or understand. He'd carried this weight for 40 years without anyone sharing the load. And it had cost him everything. His relationships, his health, his life. But he'd never wavered, never compromised. Marcus looked up at the planes surrounding him, silent witnesses to his uncle's dedication, and he made a promise out loud this time to the empty warehouse and the ghosts it held. I won't let you down, Uncle Gerald. I won't let them take this. I won't let them win. The words echoed and faded. Marcus sat in the silence, surrounded by metal and history and the weight of a legacy he was only beginning to understand. And somewhere in the darkness he could have sworn he felt his uncle's presence, approving, grateful, passing the torch to hands that, though shaking, were determined to hold it high. The phone call came at 7 in the morning. Marcus was already awake, hadn't really slept, just dozed on a cot he'd set up in the warehouse office. He'd been staying there most nights now, too paranoid to leave the planes unguarded, despite the volunteers and cameras. When his phone rang, he answered without checking the caller. Hello? Mr. Reed, this is Detective Sarah Collins with the county police. We need you to come down to the station. There's been an incident involving your property. Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of incident? Detective Collins's voice was measured, professional. Someone attempted to start a fire at the warehouse on Milner Road last night. Around 3 a.m. the security system alerted the fire department. They responded quickly, minimal damage, but we need to take your statement. Marcus was already grabbing his keys, heading for the door. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He made it in 15, drove like a maniac through empty morning streets. At the station, Detective Collins was waiting. Mid-40s, short dark hair, sharp eyes that had seen too much. She led him to an interview room, showed him photos on a tablet. The warehouse exterior, scorch marks near the back door. Evidence of an accelerant, gasoline probably. The fire department got there fast, Collins explained. Your alarm system's motion sensors picked up the activity, sent alerts. Between that and a neighbor who saw the flames and called it in, we caught it early. Could have been much worse. Marcus stared at the photos, hands shaking. Someone tried to burn it down, Collins nodded. Appears that way. Cameras catch anything? Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the security app, scrubbed back to 3 a.m. there on grainy night vision footage, a figure in dark clothes approaching the back of the warehouse. Face covered, impossible to identify. They poured something along the door, lit it, ran. The whole thing took 90 seconds. I'll send you this footage, Marcus said. Collins took down his information. Mr. Reed, I've been reading the reports from the past few weeks. The break-in attempts, the threats, the harassment. This is escalating. Whoever's doing this is getting bolder. You need to be very careful. Marcus looked her in the eye. Do you know Richard Beaumont? Collins's expression shifted slightly. I know of him. Why? Marcus told her about the encounters, the threats, the veiled mention of his kids. Collins took notes, her jaw tight. That's serious, but without proof, without witnesses or recordings, it's your word against his. Beaumont has expensive lawyers. Going after him directly is risky. Marcus slumped in his chair. So what do I do? Just wait for him to burn the place down successfully next time? Collins leaned forward. No. You document everything, every threat, every incident. You build a case, and you make sure you're protected. Hire private security if you can afford it. Make it harder for whoever's doing this. She paused. Off the record? I've dealt with Beaumont before. He's dirty, uses shell companies, intimidation tactics, makes problems disappear. But he's smart, keeps his hands clean. You're going to need to outsmart him, not just outfight him. Marcus left the station feeling worse than when he arrived. Drove to the warehouse, saw the scorch marks in daylight. Black stains on the concrete, the smell of gasoline still hanging in the air. A few more minutes and the whole place could have gone up. All those planes, all that history, his uncle's life work, turned to ash and twisted metal. He called an emergency meeting with his core group. David, Thomas the appraiser, Patricia the lawyer, and Frank, the Vietnam vet who'd become the de facto leader of the volunteer security team. They gathered at a diner across town away from prying eyes. This is getting out of hand, Patricia said bluntly. Arson is serious. This person, whoever they are, is willing to destroy everything to get what they want. Thomas nodded grimly. We need professional security. 24/7 guards, not just volunteers. Frank shook his head. That costs money Marcus doesn't have. Even with the donations coming in, we're talking thousands a week for proper security. David drummed his fingers on the table. What if we go public? Really public. Not just a press release, but a full media push. Tell the whole story. Struggling single dad inherits priceless collection, forced to fight off corrupt developers. People eat that up. Public pressure could force Beaumont to back off. Patricia considered it. It's risky. Puts a bigger target on Marcus's back. But it might also protect him. Hard to make someone disappear when everyone's watching. Marcus listened to them debate, feeling the weight of the decision. Going public meant losing privacy, meant exposing his kids to scrutiny, meant becoming a story instead of a person. But staying quiet might mean losing everything. Do it, he said finally. Set up interviews, tell the story. If they want a fight, let's give them one they can't win in the shadows. The media blitz started the next day. David had a friend at the local news station who jumped at the story. They did a feature that evening, interviewed Marcus in front of the warehouse. He kept it simple, honest. Talked about his uncle's dedication, about the historical significance of the collection, about the attempts to intimidate and destroy. Showed the scorch marks from the fire. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica, asked pointed questions. Do you think Richard Beaumont's development company is behind these attacks? Marcus chose his words carefully. I think there are people who want this property and don't care what they have to do to get it. I'm not going to back down. My uncle protected these planes for 4 decades. I'll do the same, whatever it takes. The story aired at 6 p.m. By 8 p.m., it had been picked up by regional networks. By midnight, it was trending on social media. The narrative was perfect for the internet age. Working-class hero versus corrupt developer. History versus greed. David versus Goliath. Donations flooded in. Not just $20 contributions anymore, but hundreds, thousands. A retired Air Force colonel sent $5,000 with a note. These birds deserve protection. Use this to hire proper security. An aviation museum in California sent $10,000. A World War II veterans organization sent $15,000. Within 3 days, Marcus had raised over $80,000, enough for professional security. enough to make real progress. He hired a firm that specialized in protecting high-value assets. They installed proper lighting, reinforced fencing, motion sensors, and provided 2 armed guards on site 24/7. The warehouse was becoming a fortress. But more than money, the story brought people. Volunteers multiplied. Aviation enthusiasts from 3 states away drove in to help document and maintain the planes. Historians offered expertise, lawyers offered pro bono services. One morning, Marcus arrived to find 30 people waiting at the gate, a mix of ages, backgrounds, all there to help. An elderly man in a wheelchair rolled forward. "Name's Carl," he said. "I'm 89 years old, flew B-17s over France. Heard what you're doing here. I'm too old to do much, but I can tell stories. Teach people what these planes meant to us who flew them." Marcus knelt down to shake his hand. "We'd be honored to have you, Carl." Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. The warehouse transformed from a hidden bunker into a living operation. People worked in shifts, cleaning, documenting, restoring small details on the planes. Carl and the other veterans held informal talks for visitors, sharing their experiences. The collection was coming alive in ways Gerald had never allowed, locked away as he'd kept it. Marcus realized his uncle had been wrong about one thing. Secrecy wasn't the only way to protect something valuable. Sometimes community was stronger than walls. But not everyone was happy about the attention. Marcus started getting calls from government agencies. The FAA wanted documentation on the aircraft. The IRS wanted to discuss potential tax implications of the donations. The Environmental Protection Agency wanted to inspect the property for contamination claims. Each agency had legitimate concerns, but the timing was suspicious. Patricia handled most of it, filing responses, requesting extensions, keeping the bureaucracy at bay. "Someone's pulling strings," she told Marcus, "trying to bury you in red tape. Classic intimidation tactic." Richard Beaumont remained quiet publicly, but his presence was felt. Properties near the warehouse suddenly went up for sale. The owners, when pressed, admitted they'd been made generous offers by Beaumont's company. He was buying up the surrounding land, boxing Marcus in. One night, Frank pulled Marcus aside. "We've been watching. Beaumont's crews are surveying the perimeter. They're planning something, maybe trying to find a legal way to claim access or building a case for eminent domain." Marcus felt the noose tightening. Can he do that? Force me to sell through eminent domain? Patricia was grim when he asked her. If he can argue public interest, if he can get the county to declare the land a priority development zone, then yes, it's a long shot, but with enough money and political pressure, it's possible. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. Paced the warehouse, walking between the planes, stopped in front of the B-17, the one Carl had flown in, ran his hand along the cold metal. "What would you do?" he whispered to the empty air, to his uncle's ghost, to the spirits of the men who'd flown these machines. "How do I fight money and power when all I have is determination?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The next morning, a convoy of motorcycles rolled up to the warehouse. 24 riders, leather vests, American flags. The lead rider dismounted, a man in his 60s with a grey beard and eyes that had seen combat. "You Marcus Reed?" Marcus nodded warily. "Yeah, who's asking?" The man extended his hand. "Name's Jackson. Rolling Thunder Chapter 7. We're a veterans motorcycle club. Heard you're protecting some warbirds and taking heat for it. We're here to help." Marcus shook his hand, confused. "Help how?" Jackson grinned. "We got 300 members in this state, all vets. We take care of our own and we take care of history. You need bodies? We got bodies. You need presence? We got presence. And we're real good at making people nervous when we need to." He gestured to his crew. "We'll set up regular patrols, ride by every few hours, park out front when there's trouble. Let's see Beaumont try something with a bunch of bikers watching." Marcus felt emotion well up. "I don't know what to say." Jackson clapped him on the shoulder. Say you'll let us see those planes. Most of us served. These birds mean something to us." Marcus gave them a full tour. Watched grown men cry at the sight of aircraft they'd only seen in photographs. Watched them touch the metal reverently, share stories of fathers and grandfathers who'd flown, who'd died, who'd come home broken. This wasn't just about preservation anymore. It was about honoring sacrifice, remembering, refusing to let the past be bulldozed for profit. The community continued to grow. Local businesses started donating supplies. A restaurant began providing lunch for volunteers. A hardware store gave materials at cost for repairs and improvements. The high school shop class asked if they could come learn restoration techniques. Marcus said yes to everything. The warehouse was becoming more than a storage facility. It was becoming a center, a gathering place, something meaningful. His life was transforming too. He'd quit the warehouse job after his hours got cut again. Couldn't justify the time away from what mattered. Uber was barely worth it with gas prices rising. But the donations and the beginning of grant applications meant he could focus full-time on the collection. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus wasn't working just to survive. He was building something, creating something, and it felt incredible and terrifying in equal measure. He brought Maya and Carter to see the warehouse on a Saturday. They'd been at his mother's for nearly a month. He missed them desperately, but had been too afraid to bring them around with the threats active. Now, with security in place and the Rolling Thunder guys visibly present, he felt safer. The kids were awestruck. Maya walked through the rows of planes with her mouth open. "Dad, these are real, like actual planes from World War II. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, sweetheart. Your great-uncle spent his whole life saving them." Carter ran up to a Mustang, pressed his nose against the fuselage. "Can they still fly?" Frank, who was nearby, answered. "This one could. Engines maintained, control surfaces intact. She'd need some work, but yeah, she could fly." Carter turned to Marcus with stars in his eyes. "Dad, that's the coolest thing ever." Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. For years, his kids had watched him struggle, scramble, fail. Now they were seeing him protect something important, stand for something. It mattered more than he could express. Later, as they were leaving, Maya hugged him tight. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Marcus held her, blinking back tears. "I'm just trying to do the right thing." She pulled back, looked up at him seriously. "You are. Everyone can see it." But the fight wasn't over. 2 weeks later, the county announced an emergency session to discuss the Morrison property. The agenda item was vague, but Patricia got a tip from a friendly clerk. Beaumont was making his move. He'd petitioned the county to declare the area a blighted zone requiring redevelopment, was bringing environmental reports claiming contamination, structural engineers claiming the buildings were unsafe, arguing that public safety demanded action. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Marcus had 4 days to prepare. Patricia went into overdrive, contacted the Smithsonian for supporting documents, gathered testimony from volunteers, veterans, historians, prepared a counter-argument that the property was historically significant, was being responsibly managed, and posed no public threat. But she warned Marcus. "This is political. Beaumont has relationships on the county board. He's probably promised them tax revenue, development fees, who knows what else. We need public pressure." David organized it, sent messages through every network they'd built. Veterans groups, historical societies, aviation clubs, local news media, told everyone the hearing was make or break. Thursday came. Marcus put on the only suit he owned, bought at Goodwill 10 years ago for a job interview. The pants were tight, the jacket didn't quite fit, but it was the best he had. Patricia met him outside the county building. "Big turnout," she said, nodding toward the crowd. Over 200 people had shown up. Veterans in uniform, volunteers in matching T-shirts someone had printed with Save the Morrison collection across the front, reporters with cameras. Jackson and his biker crew formed an honor guard on the steps, standing silent and imposing. Inside, the hearing room was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. The county board looked nervous, clearly not expecting this level of attention. Richard Beaumont sat in the front row with his lawyers, expensive suits, and leather briefcases. He didn't look nervous, looked confident, smug even. The board chair called the session to order. Beaumont's team presented first. Slick presentation, charts and graphs, environmental data claiming soil contamination from industrial use decades ago. Structural reports showing the warehouse had foundation issues, roof damage, posed collapse risk. An economic analysis arguing that redevelopment would bring jobs, tax revenue, community growth. They made it sound reasonable, responsible even. Then it was Marcus's turn. Patricia stood, delivered a methodical counter-argument, presented the Smithsonian's authentication of the collection's historical value. Letters from the Air Force Museum, from veterans' organizations, from historians. Photos of the restoration work, the community involvement, the educational programming being developed. But the board looked unmoved. They'd clearly already made up their minds. Marcus realized they weren't going to win with facts and logic. They needed something else. He stood up. "Excuse me, may I speak?" The board chair looked surprised. "Mr. Reed, your lawyer is presenting your case." Marcus stepped forward anyway. "I know, but this isn't just about laws and regulations. This is about what we value as a community." He turned to face the crowd. 6 weeks ago, I inherited a warehouse full of airplanes. I didn't know what to do with them. I'm not rich. I'm not educated. I'm just a guy trying to raise his kids and make ends meet. I could have sold everything, taken the money, walked away. A lot of people told me to. He looked at Beaumont. Some people really wanted me to. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But something stopped me. My Uncle Gerald spent 40 years protecting these planes. Not because they were valuable, because they meant something. They represented sacrifice, courage, men who gave everything for something bigger than themselves. And I realized that's what we're missing in this world. Everything's about money now, about development and profit and what we can extract. Nobody protects things just because they're worth protecting anymore. He turned back to the board. These planes tell a story about people who flew them, who built them, who died in them. About a man who dedicated his life to making sure that story didn't disappear, and about a community that came together to help a stranger protect something they believed in. His voice cracked slightly. You can vote to declare this property blighted. You can hand it over to developers who'll tear everything down and put up condos or strip malls or whatever makes the most money. That's your right. But you'll be destroying more than old buildings. You'll be destroying memory, purpose, the idea that some things matter more than profit. He paused. My kids came to see the warehouse last week. My daughter told me she was proud of me. First time she said that in years, because I'm finally doing something worth being proud of. Don't take that away. Don't let money win. Please. He sat down. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. One of the veterans. Then another joined. Then the whole room erupted in applause. The board chair banged his gavel, calling for order, but you could see the impact on the board members' faces. The political calculation shifting. They voted to table the decision. Wanted more time to review, to consider. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a loss either. Beaumont stormed out, his lawyers trailing behind. As Marcus left the building, people crowded around him, shaking his hand, hugging him, thanking him. Jackson pulled him aside. That was one hell of a speech, brother. You got heart. Marcus smiled tiredly. I just told the truth. That night, back at the warehouse, Marcus sat with David and Patricia, reviewing what came next. The board will vote eventually, Patricia said. They bought us time, but Beaumont won't stop. He'll regroup, come back harder. David nodded. We need a permanent solution, something that legally protects the collection forever. Patricia had been thinking about it. There's one option: establish a non-profit foundation, transfer ownership of the property and collection to it. Then it's not your personal asset anymore, it's a public trust, much harder to seize or force sale. Marcus considered it. I'd lose control. Patricia shook her head. You'd be the director, you'd run it, but legally it belongs to the foundation, to the mission of preservation and education. Protects you personally too. Limits liability. It made sense. Marcus signed the paperwork the next week. The Gerald Morrison Aviation Heritage Foundation was officially incorporated as a non-profit. The property and collection were transferred to it. Marcus was named founding director. The volunteers became official members of the board. It was real now, legitimate. Over the next month, things stabilized. The board voted not to declare the property blighted. Public pressure had worked. Beaumont's company stopped the overt attacks. Marcus assumed they were regrouping, planning a new angle, but the breathing room was welcome. The foundation applied for grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, from preservation societies, from aviation organizations. Some came through. 50,000 here, 20,000 there. Enough to keep operations running, to continue restoration work, to start planning for the future. Marcus's transformation was complete. He was no longer just a struggling single dad. He was a foundation director, a preservationist, a community organizer. He'd found purpose that went beyond survival, and slowly, carefully, he started letting his kids back into his daily life. Maya began volunteering at the warehouse after school, helping with tours, learning the stories of each plane. Carter made friends with the veterans, listened to their war stories with rapt attention. Marcus watched them grow, flourish, in ways they never had before. They had stability now, not financial stability yet, that was still precarious, but emotional stability, purpose, pride in what their father was building. One evening, as the sun set orange and gold through the warehouse windows, Carl, the elderly veteran, rolled his wheelchair next to Marcus. They stood in silence for a while, looking at the B-17. "Your uncle would be proud," Carl said finally. "He protected these birds alone for so long. You've made them matter again, made them part of something living." Marcus smiled. "I'm just trying to honor what he built." Carl shook his head. "No, you're doing more than that. Gerald kept them safe. You're making them meaningful. That's harder. That's braver." He reached out, squeezed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "Don't ever forget that." As darkness fell and the warehouse lights came on, Marcus looked around at everything they'd built. The foundation, the community, the mission. 6 months ago, he'd been drowning. Now he was building a legacy. The fight wasn't over. Beaumont was still out there, waiting for another opportunity. The financial challenges were still massive. The future was still uncertain. But Marcus wasn't afraid anymore. He had purpose, had people standing with him, had his uncle's ghost at his back and his children's pride pushing him forward. Whatever came next, he'd face it, because some things were worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth bleeding for. And Marcus Reed had finally found something worth all of that and more. 6 months later, the warehouse had transformed into something Marcus barely recognized. Professional signage hung above the entrance. Gerald Morrison Aviation Heritage Museum and Education Center. The rusted siding had been replaced with clean metal panels. The broken windows were now restored, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Inside, the planes no longer sat in dusty rows under tarps. Each aircraft occupied its own display area, properly lit, with informational placards telling its history. The stories of the men who flew them, the battles they fought, the missions they completed. The volunteers had built raised walkways so visitors could view the planes from multiple angles without touching them. Educational displays lined the walls. Photographs from World War II, personal items donated by veterans' families, interactive exhibits explaining how the aircraft worked. Maya had designed some of the youth programming. "Dad, kids learn better when they can touch stuff," she'd argued. So they'd created a section with replica controls where children could sit in a cockpit simulator and imagine what it felt like to fly. Carter had insisted they include a memorial wall, names of pilots and crew members who'd served, contributed by families from across the country. Some were famous aces. Most were ordinary men who'd done extraordinary things and then gone home to quiet lives. The wall stretched 20 feet, hundreds of names etched in bronze. Marcus stood in front of it sometimes, reading them, feeling the weight of all those lives, all that sacrifice. His uncle had protected their legacy. Now Marcus was sharing it with the world. The grand opening was scheduled for Saturday, November 11th, Veterans Day. The timing was intentional, symbolic. Patricia had coordinated with local government, the Smithsonian, military organizations, and media outlets. They were expecting over 1,000 people. The pressure was immense. Marcus barely slept the week before, triple-checking every detail. Were the bathrooms clean? Was the parking lot properly marked? Did they have enough volunteers to manage the crowd? Thomas had flown in early to help with final preparations. He walked through the exhibits with Marcus, offering suggestions, adjusting lighting on certain displays. "You've done remarkable work," Thomas said. "Gerald would be astounded. This is beyond anything he imagined." Marcus smiled tiredly. "I just hope people show up." Thomas laughed. "Marcus, we've had to turn away media requests. The governor's coming. 3 Congress members confirmed. Veterans groups from 15 states are sending delegations. People will show up." The night before the opening, Marcus couldn't stay away. Drove to the museum at midnight, let himself in with his director's key. The security guard on duty, a veteran named Ramon, nodded as Marcus passed. "Couldn't sleep either," Marcus admitted. "Too nervous." Ramon smiled. "It's going to be perfect. You'll see." Marcus walked through the darkened exhibits, flashlight in hand, stopped at each plane, ran his hand along the familiar metal. The Mustang that had started everything, the first tarp he'd pulled back, the B-17 that Carl had flown in. Carl had passed away 2 months ago, quietly in his sleep. They'd held a memorial service here at the museum. His family had donated his medals, his flight logs, his photographs, all on display now in the section dedicated to bomber crews. Marcus touched the glass case holding Carl's items. "Wish you could be here tomorrow, old friend. You helped build this as much as anyone." He continued his walk, ended up at Gerald's original desk. They'd preserved it exactly as it had been, covered in notebooks and tools, made it part of the exhibit showing how the collection had been maintained for decades. On the desk sat a framed photo of Gerald, the only good picture they'd found. A man in his 50s, grease-stained work clothes, standing in front of a Corsair with the smallest hint of a smile. Marcus had never really known this man, but he felt connected to him in ways that went beyond blood. Connected by mission, by purpose, by the belief that some things were worth protecting regardless of cost. "I did it, Uncle Gerald," Marcus whispered. "I kept them together. I made them matter. I hope that's enough." The morning of November 11th dawned cold and clear. Marcus was at the museum by 6, though the opening wasn't until 10. Volunteers started arriving early, buzzing with excitement. Maya and Carter showed up with their grandmother at 7. Maya wore a dress she'd bought with money from her part-time job at the museum. Carter had insisted on a suit and tie. "We're representing the family," he'd said seriously. Marcus's mother pulled him aside. "Your father would have been proud. I'm proud." She hugged him tight. "Look at what you've built from nothing." Marcus's eyes stung. "I had help, a lot of help." She shook her head. "You had the courage to start. That's what matters." By 9:30, the parking lot was full. Cars lined the street for blocks. The crowd gathered outside the entrance, bundled against the cold, breath misting in the November air. Veterans in uniform, families with children, aviation enthusiasts with cameras, reporters setting up for live broadcasts. Marcus stood inside, watching through the window, feeling surreal. Jackson and his motorcycle club had formed an honor guard at the entrance, standing at attention with American flags. The governor arrived at 9:45, accompanied by security and staff. Marcus shook her hand, made polite conversation, barely heard his own words over the pounding of his heart. At exactly 10 o'clock, Patricia gave him a nod. It was time. Marcus stepped outside to the podium they'd set up. The crowd quieted. 1,000 faces turned toward him. He gripped the edges of the podium to steady himself. "Thank you all for coming," he began. 6 months ago, I was a single father working 2 jobs and barely surviving. I inherited a warehouse from an uncle I barely knew. Inside that warehouse, I found something incredible. Not just airplanes, but a legacy, a mission. A reminder that some people dedicate their entire lives to protecting what matters, even when no one notices or cares. His voice grew stronger. My uncle Gerald Morrison spent 40 years preserving these aircraft. He turned down millions of dollars, lived modestly, alone, focused entirely on keeping this collection intact. People thought he was crazy, but he wasn't. He understood something fundamental, that history matters, that sacrifice should be remembered, that the machines these brave men flew into combat deserve to be honored, not scrapped for parts or forgotten in junkyards. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. This museum exists because of Gerald's vision, but it exists in this form because of all of you, the volunteers who gave their time, the veterans who shared their stories, the donors who believed in the mission, the community that stood up when powerful people tried to destroy this. You made this possible. This is your museum as much as it's mine. He gestured toward the building. Inside, you'll find 27 aircraft that fought for freedom. You'll find the names of heroes. You'll find interactive exhibits where children can learn what courage looks like. And most importantly, you'll find proof that ordinary people, working together, can protect extraordinary things. That money and power don't always win. That legacy matters more than profit. His voice cracked slightly. My uncle died alone, probably thinking his life's work would be lost. I wish he could see this. See these planes finally shared with the world. See the impact they're having. But I think somehow he knows, and I think he's proud. Marcus stepped back. Welcome to the Gerald Morrison Aviation Heritage Museum. Thank you for being part of this story. The applause was thunderous. People surged forward as the doors opened. Marcus stepped aside, let the crowd flow past him into the museum, watched their faces light up as they saw the planes, heard gasps of awe, children's excited shouts, veterans' quiet tears. Maya found him in the chaos. "Dad, there's someone here asking for you. Says it's important." Marcus followed her through the crowd. In a quiet corner near the gift shop stood a man he'd hoped never to see again. Richard Beaumont. Marcus's jaw tightened. "What are you doing here?" Beaumont looked older somehow, tired, the arrogance gone from his expression. "I came to see what you built and to apologize." Marcus nearly laughed. "Apologize? You tried to burn this place down, threatened my kids, did everything possible to destroy this." Beaumont nodded slowly. "I know, and I was wrong. I saw dollar signs and development potential. Didn't see the value in what your uncle created, what you've created now." He gestured around. "This is remarkable. I was a fool." Marcus crossed his arms. "Why should I believe you?" Beaumont pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I'm not asking you to. I'm just here to give you this and then leave." He handed over the envelope. "My company owns the properties surrounding this museum, 12 acres total. I'm donating them to your foundation. No strings. Use them for parking, expansion, whatever you need." Marcus stared at the envelope, stunned. "Why?" Beaumont's smile was sad. Because I'm 73 years old, spent my whole life building strip malls and condos, destroying things to make money. Thought that was success. But standing here, seeing what you've built, seeing the impact it's having, I realized I got it all wrong. You're going to be remembered, Marcus. Your uncle's going to be remembered. Me? I'll be forgotten the day I die. He extended his hand. I can't undo the damage I caused, but maybe this helps. Marcus hesitated, then shook his hand. It does, thank you. Beaumont nodded once and left, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus opened the envelope. The deed transfer was already signed, notarized, ready to file. 12 acres, worth probably $5 million, donated free and clear. Patricia appeared at his elbow. Did I just see Richard Beaumont? Marcus showed her the papers. She read them, eyes widening. Holy shit, this changes everything. You can build proper parking, maybe a restoration hangar, educational classrooms. This is huge. Marcus folded the papers carefully. My uncle spent 40 years fighting people like him. Maybe in the end the collection changed him too, changed what he valued. The rest of the day was a blur. Thousands of people flowed through the museum. Children climbed into the cockpit simulators. Veterans stood in front of planes with tears streaming down their faces, telling stories to anyone who'd listen. Reporters interviewed Marcus a dozen times. The governor gave a speech praising the museum as an example of grassroots historic preservation. By the time they closed at 6, Marcus was exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. The volunteers gathered for a private celebration afterward. Pizza and cheap champagne in the museum's new conference room. Toasts were made, stories shared, laughter and tears mixing freely. Jackson stood, raised his glass. To Gerald Morrison, who had the vision, and to Marcus Reed, who had the guts to see it through. You brought us all together, brother, gave us purpose. That's worth more than money. Everyone drank. Marcus felt overwhelmed by gratitude. These people, strangers 6 months ago, had become family. When everyone had left and the museum was finally quiet, Marcus walked the exhibits one last time, stopped at Gerald's desk, noticed something he'd never seen before, a small drawer at the bottom, almost invisible in the woodwork. He pulled it open. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed, addressed in Gerald's handwriting. To Marcus, when the work is done. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, dated 3 months before Gerald's death. He sat down to read. Dear Marcus, if you're reading this, then you did it. You kept the collection together. You found a way to protect what I spent my life preserving. I knew you would. I watched you from a distance over the years, saw you struggle, saw you keep fighting even when life kept knocking you down, saw you raise your kids alone, work yourself to exhaustion, never give up. That's why I chose you. You're probably wondering why I didn't just donate these planes to a museum when I was alive. Truth is, I tried. Contacted the Smithsonian, the Air Force Museum, others. They all wanted to cherry-pick. Take the rare ones, leave the rest, separate them. I couldn't bear that. These birds fought together. Some came home, some didn't, but they belonged to the same war, the same sacrifice. Splitting them up felt like betraying that, so I waited. Kept them hidden. Hoped the right person would come along, someone who understood that some things are more important than money or convenience, someone who'd fight to keep them together even when it was hard. I'm sorry I put that burden on you. Sorry I didn't reach out while I was alive, build a relationship, make this easier. I was afraid. Afraid of letting people in, afraid of being disappointed, afraid I'd lose control of the mission if I shared it. I died alone because I couldn't trust anyone. Don't make that mistake. The planes aren't the real inheritance, Marcus. The real gift is the chance to build something meaningful, to create community around shared purpose, to show your kids that their father stands for something. That's worth more than $200 million. Worth more than all the metal and history in this warehouse. You've already proven yourself worthy. But here's my final piece of advice. Don't hold this collection so tight you suffocate it. Gerald Morrison kept these planes alive but locked away. Marcus Reed brought them into the light. That took more courage than I ever had. Let them fly. Not literally, though some could, but metaphorically. Let them inspire, educate, unite. Let them be what they were meant to be. Tools of freedom, symbols of sacrifice, bridges between past and future. I'm proud of you, nephew. Prouder than I ever told you in life. You took my secret and turned it into something beautiful. You turned my isolation into community, my fear into hope. Thank you for finishing what I started. Thank you for being braver than I was. With love and respect, Uncle Gerald. Marcus set the letter down, vision blurred with tears, sat in the silence of the museum, surrounded by planes and history and purpose. He'd thought the inheritance was the aircraft, the money they represented, the historical value, the legacy. But Gerald was right. The real gift was the transformation. From struggling single father to foundation director, from surviving to thriving, from isolation to community, from meaningless work to purposeful mission. He pulled out his phone, texted Maya and Carter. "Can you guys come to the museum tomorrow? There's something I want to show you." They arrived Sunday morning. Marcus took them to Gerald's desk, showed them the letter, watched them read it, tears forming in their eyes. "He knew you could do it, Dad," Maya said softly. Carter hugged him. "You're a hero." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just a guy who got lucky, who had help from incredible people, who refused to give up when giving up would have been easier." Maya looked at him seriously. "That's what makes someone a hero, Dad, not being special, just refusing to quit." Over the following months, the museum flourished. Attendance stayed strong. School groups booked field trips months in advance. The foundation received major grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, from aviation organizations, from private donors moved by the story. They hired staff, opened a proper gift shop and cafe, started a restoration training program where veterans could learn aircraft maintenance skills, used the donated land from Beaumont to build a proper parking lot and education center. Marcus's life had changed completely. He earned a modest salary as foundation director, not getting rich but enough to rent a small house near the museum, bring his kids home, provide stability. Maya thrived, got accepted to an engineering program with scholarships, wanted to study aerospace, inspired by the museum. Carter found purpose helping at the museum every weekend, became the youngest tour guide, charming visitors with his enthusiasm. Marcus started dating again. Met a woman named Sarah who volunteered at the museum, taught high school history. She understood his dedication to the collection, shared his values. They took things slow, but for the first time since his divorce, Marcus felt like he could open his heart again. 1 year after the opening, they held an anniversary celebration, dedicated a new exhibit to the volunteers who'd made everything possible. Photos of Frank, Carl, Jackson, all the people who'd stood with Marcus when the outcome was uncertain. Some had passed away, most were still active, still coming to the museum, still sharing stories. Thomas gave the keynote speech. "A year ago, we opened these doors uncertain if anyone would care about old airplanes and older stories. But you came, thousands of you. You brought your children and your parents. You shared your own stories. You proved that history matters, that sacrifice should be remembered, that community can form around shared purpose. The Gerald Morrison Aviation Heritage Museum is more than a collection of aircraft. It's proof that ordinary people doing extraordinary things can change the world." Marcus stood at the back of the crowd, watching, his mother beside him, Sarah holding his hand, his kids nearby talking with veterans. This was his life now. Not perfect, still challenging, still uncertain in many ways, but meaningful, purposeful, rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. He thought about that morning a year and a half ago when Harold Patterson had handed him those brass keys, told him the inheritance was worthless. Everyone had said to walk away. Sometimes Marcus wondered what would have happened if he had. If he'd refused the property, let it go to auction, continued his grinding existence. He'd probably still be working 2 jobs, still barely surviving, still feeling like his life didn't matter. But he'd made a different choice, opened that door, pulled back those tarps, said yes to the impossible, and everything had changed. Not because of the money, though the collection's value had indeed transformed his circumstances, but because he'd found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth building his life around. His uncle had given him more than aircraft and property, had given him a second chance, a new beginning, proof that it's never too late to find purpose. Marcus slipped away from the celebration, walked through the museum one more time. The planes sat silent and majestic under their lights. Heaven's Fury, Liberty Bell, Ghost Rider, each name a story, each aircraft a bridge between past and future. He stopped at the memorial wall, ran his fingers over the engraved names. Thousands of men who'd flown these machines into danger. Some came home, many didn't. Gerald had honored them by preserving their aircraft. Marcus honored them by sharing the story, making sure new generations understood the cost of freedom, understood that ordinary people, when called, can do extraordinary things. His phone buzzed. A text from the Smithsonian. They wanted to feature the museum in their national magazine, wanted to do a documentary about Gerald's collection and Marcus's journey. He smiled, typed back acceptance. 6 months ago, he would have been terrified of that attention. Now, he welcomed it. The more people who knew this story, the more who understood what his uncle had protected, the better. Because this wasn't about Marcus Reed or Gerald Morrison anymore. It was about all of us, about what we choose to value, about whether we're willing to protect beauty and history and meaning in a world that often only cares about profit, about whether we believe some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. Marcus had answered those questions with his life, and the answer was yes, always yes. Anyone can inherit money or property, but what truly changes us is inheriting purpose, finding the courage to protect what matters and building something that outlasts our own lives. As the anniversary celebration continued outside and laughter echoed through the museum halls, Marcus Reed stood among the aircraft his uncle had saved and he had shared, no longer the broken-down single father who could barely afford gas, but a man who'd discovered that the most valuable inheritance isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in meaning, in legacy, in the lives we touch and the stories we preserve. Because for Marcus, and for everyone who walked through these doors, the lesson was clear. We don't find our purpose, we build it. One choice at a time, one fight at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone hands us the keys to something extraordinary and trusts us to protect it. The real question is whether we're brave enough to turn that key and step into the unknown. Marcus had been, and it made all the difference. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe some inheritances are worth more than money.